Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this meeting of Midlothian Council. Do you have any apologies?
Apology from Mrs Harkness, Religious Representative, Chair.
The order of business.
The order of business, Provost, in terms of follow papers, those have been issued in respect of item numbers 11, that's Roslyn Paradise Primary Schools, item number 28 on local government paying conditions, and item number 30 on the New Battle Centre. Additional papers have been issued as item number 6A regarding the election of the Leader of the Council, and item number 27A on regeneration capital grants. In terms of existing business, the notice of motion at item number 6 has been withdrawn by the mover and seconder.
Okay, thank you. Are there any declarations of interest? Councillor Bennett.
Chair, I'd like to declare an interest in item number 29.
Councillor Russell.
Similarly, I want to declare an interest as a beneficiary of 29.
I will have to declare an interest as well. Okay. Councillor Thompson.
Yeah, just declare an interest in item 7, given that it's to do with renunciation of my salary. So.
Okay, thank you. We have minutes from meetings for approval. Midlothian Council on 12th of May 2015. 12th of May, I should say, yeah. For noting consideration, the Cabinet on the 21st of April 2015. Planning Committee, 21st of April 2015. General Purposes Committee, 31st of March 2015. Performance Review and Scrutiny Committee, 11th of March 2015. 11th of March 2015. Audit Committee, 5th of May 2015. And Midlothian Safer Communities Board, 24th of February 2015. We now move to item number 5, which is a question to the Leader of the Council from Councillor Baxter.
Thanks, Provost. I've obviously got the question from Councillor Baxter. I think there is an answer either circulated or about to be circulated. There's a fair amount of detail to the answer, so I would suggest that I would think it covers the points Councillor Baxter has raised in the question, but I'm sure that if there are any follow-ups to that, he can pick them up out with this meeting. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Now move to item 6A, election of the Leader of the Council and the resignation of Councillor Owen Thompson. We have a report by Chief Executive, Mr Lawrie.
Thank you, Provost. The purpose of this report is to advise of the resignation of Councillor Thompson as Leader of the Council with immediate effect, to advise of the resignation of Councillor Thompson from the Council with effect from the 1st of July, to invite the Council to elect a new Council Leader and to consider arrangements for filling the resulting casual vacancy. The relevant provisions in respect of the election of a new leader are set out at Section 2 of the report. Section 3 relates to the casual vacancy in the office of Councillor and the arrangements in respect of a future by-election. The recommendations in front of you today is that the Council is invited to note the resignation of Councillor Thompson as Leader of the Council with immediate effect and as a member of Midlothian Council effective from 1st July, to elect a new Leader of the Council and to note that the date of the resulting by-election will be fixed by the Returning Officer.
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to congratulate Councillor Thompson being elected to Westminster as our MP for Midlothian. And would you like to read out your resignation? Thank you.
Thanks, Ross. Yeah, the letter I've submitted to the Chief Executive has been circulated in the report to all. And I will apologise that it was so soon prior to this meeting, but as you might imagine, I've been a bit busy over the last number of weeks, and was very keen to see action taken at this meeting so that we could have a new leader in place over the summer months. Obviously, the last council meeting was only a matter of days after the general election, so that didn't particularly give any time to take action at that point. But the resignation is there, and as I say, I've thoroughly enjoyed my just over 9.5 years now in Midlothian Council, having been elected at the by-election in 2005. As many here know, at that time I was the only SNP councillor in Midlothian, the first for a good number of years. It certainly shows how times have changed since 2005, to the point that today I'm resigning as the leader of the council and off to fully concentrate on my new role as the MP for Midlothian, joining my colleagues Colin Beattie and Christian Graham, who as the MSPs for Midlothian, and I think leaving the council in very good shape under this SNP-led administration. I'd like to thank all of my colleagues in the administration for all the help and support over the last number of years, and I'd extend that thanks to all members of the council who have worked alongside me since the first days in 2005. Many members here have been present for that whole time, and it has been a pleasure. While we have often disagreed, I don't think at any point it's ever been personal, and we've certainly had a good laugh a few times along the way. I'd like to thank the Chief Executive and his staff for all the help and support they've given me through this time. Also, it has been an absolute pleasure to serve in Midlothian Council, representing first the Lone Head ward, and then since 2007 the wider Midlothian West ward. But I think time now for somebody else to take up the reins, so that a fully committed councillor can take on this role, rather than myself, who'll be spending a fair bit of time in London. So to that end, as I say, my resignation is there. I would be delighted to finish by proposing that Councillor Kath Johnson take my place as council leader. I think Kath has, over the time in council since 2012, shown a real drive and commitment, and a real understanding of the issues in Midlothian in her role as the member for Health and Social Care, and will make an excellent next leader for Midlothian Council to continue to drive forward the improvements that we've seen under this SNP-led administration.
Thank you. Councillor Constable.
Thank you, Provost. It gives me great pleasure to second this motion to propose Councillor Kath Johnson as leader. I've worked alongside her since she was elected in 2012, and I've grown more and more impressed with the amount of work and dedication she's put into her role as councillor, and I'm sure she's going to make an excellent leader of this council, and I shall be very proud to back her up as the deputy leader.
Are there any other nominations? Councillor Muirhead.
Yeah, Provost. The last-minute resignation of Councillor Thompson, which I think we received by email last night about 6:20, doesn't come as any surprise. In fact, it could well have come at the last council meeting. I know that there was some intention to do that until it was realised that the numbers didn't quite stack up at that time. I read this the letter initially, and I was pretty surprised at the bulk of it being devoted to having a pop at the Labour group. I'd kind of expected to come here today to simply congratulate Councillor Thompson on his victory in the general election. And to be frank, I thought he had a bit more class than that, to devote the majority or a fair chunk of his letter to criticising this group. And then I had a think about it, and the reality is that he's really got to do that because there's so little to mention in terms of achievement of this administration, both during his term as leader and the several previous leaders that have been in place since the election in 2012. The house building programme that there was over 800 houses built by the Labour administration is grinding to a halt. There's been very little progress on that over the piece. Under the previous administration, we built or refurbished 15 schools, and since the election, the SNP have managed to open 2, both of which were commissioned by the previous administration. The only school that they've had sole responsibility for, New Battle, is dragging on and on, way beyond the timescales that were originally envisaged, and likely to cost well in excess per square metre than the schools that were built under the previous administration, which the SNP criticised us for being so expensive. We see further on in the agenda the woeful progress that's being made by the Transformation Board that Owen is criticising us for not being members of. We see, as an example, of the abject failure of the Community Safety Board, for instance, to influence Police Scotland's withdrawal of the parking service, policing within the whole of Scotland, but in particular in Midlothian. We no longer have the same level of influence, which is what this group predicted when it refused to take, and still refuses to take part in that. He uses half his letter to criticise us for not taking part in the community safety or the transformation groups. Can I remind them that we made a genuine offer to participate in the transformation group at the time of the budget on the basis of us being prepared to assist, to help, to find genuine alternatives to the kind of cuts that this administration forced through to the services to the vulnerable and elderly. And in effect, the leader basically, I think, laughed in her face when we put that forward. I think that shows that nothing more than this is manufactured disappointment and concern, as expressed in his letter, for political purposes. This group takes their responsibilities as the Council's opposition very seriously and will continue to hold the administration to account for their actions or, in some circumstances, I would say, inactions. Owen says that continued strong leadership will be required in the period ahead. Yet this will be the 4th leader that the Council's had in 3 years. 5th, if you count the few days that Owen was group leader after the election before his colleagues stabbed him in the back. I agree, Provost, that this Council does need a strong leader who knows what they're doing and challenges officers and members to think outside the box and genuinely move this Council forward. And on that basis, I would like to move Councillor Milligan as Leader of the Council.
Thank you. Councillor Rimney.
Thanks, Provost. I'll second Councillor Muirhead, and a lot of what he said I would have endorsed anyway. It's unfortunate that the letter today is in front of us in the way that it is. I'll be the first, well, just saw you at the door for the first time since your election, and I congratulated you on. And I did that genuinely because not only were we colleagues in this council when you came on in 2005, but we've worked together in Midlothian West since 2007. And I valued that relationship, and I said it in 2012 from the rostrum on the election day. And I valued that, and it's a bit disappointing to me to see a letter like this in front of us, a resignation letter, by all means fine, but to actually go into the details of having a pop, as Councillor Muirhead said, I think is indefensible. I really do. I just hope that in your days and years and months that go on from here, as a Member of Parliament, you will remember that you represent everybody, including members of this group as well, and that you will be approachable and you will be supportive where you can in certain things going on. And if you want to be, dare I say, the person that holds the jackets to get a compromise, then so be it. But I do get disappointed that it's as if everything's happened since 2012 and nothing that was progressive, and I'll use the word because that's the SNP word now, progressive politics. It's what you say all the time, and you've said it in your letter here as well, Councillor Dobson. I noticed that today. A progressive, forward-looking authority. I thought we were actually pretty progressive and forward-looking when we decided to embark on the replacement schools programme. I think we're pretty progressive when we looked at building the first of the council houses in Scotland after so many years of non-building. And we've seen the numbers go up on the waiting list, notwithstanding what we're all trying to do. So I thought we were pretty progressive then anyway, but we'll use that word, and I used it with the Transport Minister last week when we met him, and I will continue to use that, because you're not the only group that's got progressive, whatever that means. It's a bit like sustainability, and it's a bit like some of the other words that come out. We bring a word out, and it can mean a number of things to a number of people. I just wish you well in what you're doing. But, you know, I'm just disappointed, personally, and I'm sure collectively, about the tone of the letter. And I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. Now move to the election. Those in favour of Councillor Johnson, please show. 1,
2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9.
Those in favour of Councillor Milligan, please show. 1,
2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
Councillor Johnson, you have now been elected as the new leader of the council.
Thank you very much. It will and is a huge privilege and an honour to take on this big responsibility, and I'll do the best I can for all of Midlothian's people. Thank you, Russell, for reminding us. I'd like to thank Owen for all the work he's carried out during his time as leader, and I wish him well as he's in the role as MP as well. And also I look forward to working with him and us having a closer link at Westminster. In terms of the vacancy of the Cabinet position, I think it's best we consider that in due course. But many thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson.
Yeah, just I suppose to tidy up the other recommendations there. We've elected the new leader, but I think from Councillor Johnson's suggestion is that the position of the resulting positions is we continue any decision on the Cabinet post till the next meeting.
Okay, thank you. We now move to item number 7. This is the renunciation of Councillor's allowance and a report by Mr Blair.
Thanks, Provost. This report seeks Council governance for Councillor Thompson to forgo his allowance. The details are set out in the main body of the report, and today Council is requested to consider the recommendation as detailed in section 4 on page 10 of today's papers. Thanks, Provost.
Councillor Constable.
I'd like to formally move the recommendation, Provost.
Thank you. We'll second that for that. Thank you, Councillor Johnson. Okay, can we now ask Councillor Thompson to come back in, please? We move to item number 8. And a report by the Chief Executive, Mr Lawrie.
Thank you, Provost. This report seeks the Council's approval of the Single Midlothian Plan. The report was previously considered at the Council meeting on the 12th of May and is unchanged since then. A summary of the Single Midlothian Plan is attached to the report, and the full Single Midlothian Plan has previously been circulated to members. The report sets out the background to community planning, the annual planning cycle, the key priorities and approaches, and the position with regard to area targeting. At the previous Council meeting, members agreed to continue consideration of the Single Midlothian Plan to a seminar of the Council, and the report of that seminar is item 8B on today's agenda. And members are asked to approve the plan.
Councillor Constable.
Thank you, Provost. Yes, we moved to a seminar at the last meeting, and that was held. A very good account was given, and many questions were asked, as will be shown in the next item. I'd like to formally move the adoption of the Midlothian Single Plan.
Thank you. We move to number 8B, a report of the seminar. Well, no, this is just for nothing, so we'll just move on from there. Thank you. Item number 9, a report, delivering excellent, a report by the Chief Executive, Mr. Lorry.
Thank you, Provost. This report proposes the adoption of delivering excellence as a framework to secure service and financial sustainability in what is a very challenging financial environment for the public sector. The previous financial strategy report to the Council, which was in February of this year, highlighted that there was a continuing projected budget shortfall in the period to 2017-18, and that a shortfall of close to 5 million remained at that stage. An update on the financial strategy and revenue budget projections, incorporating changes as a consequence of the 2014-15 final outturn and changes in government spending plans following the UK government's summer budget, will be reported to the Council after the summer recess, and it is anticipated that the impact of the budget is likely to result in an even more challenging financial position. The framework that you have in front of you today has been developed to respond to the outstanding financial challenge for 2017-18 and beyond, and the inevitable financial and service challenges the Council will face in future years. In this regard, of course, our position is no different from other councils, but I quote at the bottom of page 29 of your agenda the findings of Grant Thornton, who are currently, of course, our external auditors in one of their most recent reports. This was a report about local authority finance in general, pointing out that because of the significant challenges, local authorities must improve their efficiency and productivity, reduce their costs, and have sustainable medium-term financial plans to ensure their financial health remains robust. And this is going to inevitably require innovation and adaptation. It will require us to reshape services in line with user and customer needs, and perhaps take a more entrepreneurial approach in terms of taking forward our work. Therefore, the Delivering Excellence framework sets out an approach which provides the means to both realise savings of the scale and magnitude required, and to deliver the high-quality services by engaging staff and partners, stakeholders and citizens to determine the nature of future service delivery, level of service standards and the method of delivery. And in order to perform successfully in this environment, the Council will require to forward plan for the period beyond the known financial settlements and to prioritise services in that context. The Delivering Excellence framework builds on existing service review and transformation activities already established by the Council, which have produced significant savings in previous years, and aims to create a cohesive and consistent approach to future service delivery and transformation, with the customer and service user at the core of that, and employees across the Council empowered to reshape their services. And the key elements of the framework are set out at page 31 of your agenda, and the expected outcomes at section 3.2 on page 31 and going on to page 32. Section 4 sets out the fact that this is complementary and a development of the current transformation programme, and Section 5 includes governance arrangements and a timeline which takes us through to budget decisions anticipated in December 2016. The timetable allows Council to approve a final budget for 2017-18 and sustainable and robust plans for 2018-19 and 2019-20 in December 2016. And service proposals will be reported through the Business Transformation Steering Group and onto the Council as appropriate. Section 6 relates to community engagement, which needs to be a central part of this process. And I think the primary requirement of this should be that we're looking for that engagement to produce statistically robust results wherever possible, using a range of approaches. And detailed proposals in respect of community engagement will be developed and brought forward after the summer recess. And the aim will be to encourage a wider understanding of the challenges the Council faces, whether service or financial, and options for future service delivery, and how individuals and groups can contribute to shaping that. There are a number of recommendations set out on page 36 of your agenda. Council is recommended to note that an updated financial strategy and revenue budget projections will be reported to the Council after the summer recess. Asked to adopt the Delivering Excellence framework as set out in this report, to endorse the overarching timeline and governance arrangements set out in section 5, and to note the proposed engagement and consultation aspects of the framework as set out in section 6, and that more detailed proposals will be developed in this respect and brought forward after the summer recess. And a schematic of the framework is attached to the report as an appendix.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson.
Yeah, obviously, we're still in a time of extreme financial pressure, and there's an emergency budget happening in Westminster on the 8th of July, where we expect to see yet more cuts being handed down from the government. So it's entirely appropriate that we make use of every tool that we can to make sure that we're always at the forefront of delivering the savings that we need to continue to run the services that the people of Midlothian expect. So with that in mind, I would endorse the recommendations included in this report. I think the framework provides another avenue to make sure that we're delivering as best we can.
Councillor Milligan.
Provost, welcome the report. Just one sort of question of maybe I have is, if in the options in option 3 we're talking about stop, reduce options to be taken forward for further consideration, if that means that we should actually be looking to see whether or not this is a service we need to maintain, is it a service we need to continue, I would have hoped in all the way through that when we're looking at delivering excellence, no matter what, we would actually look at, is this a service that's required, is it a service that's needed, and if it is there other ways to provide that service? And I would hope the kind of wording you've got in there actually means that. However, if you could just maybe clarify.
Thank you, Provost. I mean, it does mean that, because I think that with regard to any service, we need to be looking at the range of options there may be to provide that. And indeed, stopping any service would be, I would have thought, a last resort. And of course, these matters will be brought back through the Transformation Group and into the Council.
Thank you. Happy to accept the recommendations. Thank you. We move to item 10, Community Management of Assets Policy, a report by Mr Sherritt.
Thanks, Provost. This report introduces a new policy dealing with the transfer of assets to community groups. Currently, this is done on a case-by-case basis, and this policy aims to adopt a clear and concise approach reflecting the expectations of the forthcoming Community Empowerment Bill. Elected members were briefed on this policy and the content of this report on the 16th of June, which covered the variety of styles of occupancy agreements, eligibility of community groups, the process and the assessment arrangements that we are trying to set out within the policy. The recommendations of this report are that the Council adopt the Community Management of Asset Policy and delegate the powers to the Corporate Management Team to amend these if the Community Empowerment Act statutory guidance requires that in the future, and request that the Director of Resources establish a cross-directorate team to agree a schedule of assets which might be considered for community management, and that this schedule be published before the end of October this year and thereafter maintained on a regular basis.
Thank you. Councillor Rosie.
Thanks, Provost. I think, as Gary has said, this policy reflects expectations for the asset transfer as set out in the current Community Empowerment Scotland Bill, which is expected to complete its passage through Parliament in August. And I think it's an opportunity for community groups who are constituted, willing and able to take on an asset to do so. So I would ask the Council to accept the recommendations at 5A and B.
Councillor Milligan.
Provost, I'm quite happy to accept the recommendations, but we would like some assurances on how this is going to work. I mean, the first thing I think we need to be saying loud and clear, and I think that the paper does actually say that, where an asset is going to be closed and replaced elsewhere, and that asset is going to be sold to help pay for that, and we need to be very clear that that's going to be used for that purpose and no transferred. But the one thing I think we need to be very clear on is the timelines of when an asset will be declared surplus. Most of the buildings we close through planned reasons, no as a matter of reaction of that. So we know well in advance that we are going to close a building, and we need to have a time scale in for when we immediately know we're going to close that building. The next question will be, is there any other use for it internally within the council? There should be a time span put in for that to be dealt with, and then if there isn't a need for it in the council, then there should be an immediate acknowledgement to the public and to the council that this building could be surplus, and it would didn't wait until we actually go to close the doors on a building and then have to sit with an empty building with security all boarded up for 6 months, 9 months to a year, until different local groups can have a look at business plans. And you've got to keep in mind these local groups that are going to take this over have to put in applications for grant assistance and to build a business plan on that. So the earlier we declare these buildings surplus, the more chance that community groups will have having these plans in place as we go to vacate the building, and it can be a seamless just handover. So I think that's really important. I would like to get assurances that that's exactly what will happen.
Yeah, I think I took that away from the briefing we had last week, and I think the phrase is we will put that in as soon as possible, and it will be shown on the register of assets. So as soon as we identify it surplus to requirements, it gets noted on that register.
Councillor Baxter.
Thank you, Provost. Yes, I'm very pleased with this document. I think there's a lot of work's gone into it, and it gives a very clear roadmap for community groups who take an interest in an asset which is being disposed of. I'm particularly pleased that at the commitment to providing support for local groups, and especially where there are competing applications. I think the problem, as we've noted in the past, trying to determine whether one is a preferred bidder or not has caused complications, and I think it's really useful for communities to be told right at the outset that they have to work together as a community, and I think that's a very positive part of this document. I'm very happy to give my support to this policy.
Councillor Pottinger.
Yeah, the Community Empowerment Scotland Bill doesn't make a lot of changes to our procedures that we have within Midlothian Council. The paragraph 2 in background, on page 39, Midlothian has a long history of transferring the management responsibility of properties and community groups. And that's correct. There's various options all the time that are getting going forward. But if this means that, rather than just general sale, it becomes a voluntary organisation that takes over a particular building, we have to be clear, and who qualifies and who doesn't qualify. We have to be clear on the timelines, as already been said, because a sitting tenant, in a building will always be considered for an occupier in a building that maybe becomes surplus to requirements. The need to keep any vacant buildings non-vacant is a cost pressure, and the seamless change from one to another has to have advance notification. And that advance notification that the building will become surplus to requirement on such and such a date, so others can look at the possibilities of having that building and look at the financial sustainability that they could put in place for such an offer. This is not about buildings that's been earmarked for hub kind of existence. You know, we've done all that and we've been through all that, and I know issues can uprise in different areas. But the thing is, you know, this is about, you know, disposing of buildings that we no longer require. But people have to know what the criteria means that we no longer require. You know, there's no point looking at it and saying, I wonder if that will be no longer required, or I wonder if it will be no longer, you know, or if it's earmarked for just even general sale or whatever. But you know, we have to have a clear policy on what we're going, so there's no deemed to be favouring any particular group or any particular geographical area or any size of particular buildings. We have a property register, a lot of buildings that's out there for sale. We should also be able to enhance this on management and transfer responsibility of like an addendum to such a report. But the Community Empowerment Engagement Bill doesn't do much to change this. We've done a lot of this practice already, and it's been the best practice that we've done on disposing of buildings in the past.
Thank you. Anybody else? Thank you. We now move to item number 11, Paradise and Roslin Primary Schools, an update report from Gary Sherritt. Thank you.
Thanks, Provost. This report providing an update to Council on the progress that we've made on the Paradise and Roslin Primary School projects, specifically on the funding position with SFT, the consultation process that we've embarked on to date, the procurement strategy that we are embarking on for the purchase or the tendering for both projects, and the outcome of negotiations we've had with NHS Lothian. The Section 2.1, the funding application to Scottish Futures Trust, resulted in a maximum capital contribution of 9.8 million from Scottish Government, which is the release of the capital injection into New Battle, as previously noted to Council in reports that have come forward in the past. The consultation process for Roslin Primary School and the nursery there was set out in Section 2.2, but particularly of note is that the increased accommodation that's required to accommodate a 40-40 nursery as opposed to a 20-20 nursery, as was previously noted to Council. The community feedback is set out in Section 2.2.3. The table there shows the response and the concerns that were raised and the response that we've built into the design and taken action on. Section 2.3 sets out the consultation outcomes for Paradise Primary School. This went through various stages, initially deciding on the combined facility, putting the school alongside the leisure centre. Then it went on to what would be expected to be within the building. Again, the community and groups, stakeholder groups, showed their hand on that and what they would like to see within the building, and ultimately addressing specifics to do with the site and the design as it's being evolved. Again, those are set out in the various tables within the paper. Section 2.4 outlines the NHS involvement within the project, and NHS Lothian have confirmed that they wish to see the medical practice relocated to the new project, and they are going through their various approvals to secure the monies for that. There is a requirement to relocate Sure Start provision within Lone Head, and again the paper sets out the fact that we have been in consultation with education colleagues, and it's been determined that this would be beneficial to have that provision within the early years service within the Lone Head area, and space has therefore been agreed to be put into the building in the design, and that's shown in the resultant outcome of the accommodation schedule within this paper. The after-school provision is set out in 2.6 on a like-for-like basis, again taking the availability of funds and using the money to recreate what we already have in the Loanhead area. And similarly, the library provision has been looked at on a like-for-like basis with the benefit, for the community library, with the benefit of the school library going into the area, bringing those two facilities together, similar to what we've created in the last wage centre. Within the design section in 3.1, we had various drop-in sessions where the community came in and gave their feedback on that design, and we will continue that process. In fact, the next set of drop-in sessions are next week. Programmes set out in 3.3. 3.4 covers a procurement route, which we propose to go down a design and build, albeit we will have taken that design so far through the process, but transferring the design and build risk onto the contractors, good practice, and gives us less by way of claims in the future. Accommodation schedules are set out in 3.5, reflecting the changes that I've described to the nurseries and Sure Start and the likes. And the resultant knock-on effect of that is the increase in costs set out in 3.6. 4.1 highlights the increase in capital costs, going from 6 million to 9 million, and the resultant revenue cost of that showing that the spend would add 468,000 per annum to the revenue budget, plus the increased non-domestic rates of 239,000, giving a total of 707,000 per annum. As a result, it's recommended that Council note the response from SFT and confirm the funding of the 9.8 million, note the school accommodation schedules that are attached within the paper, instruct the directors, not just of resources but also education, to bring back to Council a review of the proposed level of accommodation following the completion of the consultation exercise, and the principles of the shared services that are outlined, the application of the SFT cost and space metrics, which will result in the outcome of the accommodation schedule, and the expected overall final cost for the facilities. To note the progress on the design development, note the intended procurement strategy, note the agreed plans as they stand at the moment with the medical practice, instruct the Director of Resources to continue with the design development of that practice until such time if we get full NHS governance in place. Note the estimated cost for that element of 2.35 million, which will be required to be fully funded by NHS Lothian, and finally to approve the inclusion of £1 million set aside from the capital costs within the General Services capital plan to cover the expenditure up to the tender stage of this project.
Thank you. Councillor Rosie.
Yeah, thanks, Provost. I think, as Gary said, this is following extensive consultation in what the communities and the schools want. The community users and NHS are on board as far as Paradise is concerned, and I think the proposed increases in the size of the two schools, they're necessary to meet the early years provision. And should we not deal with it now, then I think we could be landed with extensive costs to increase the buildings in the future, etc. So, on that lines, I would move that we accept the recommendations at Part 5.
Thank you. Councillor Constable.
Thank you, Provost. It was about this time last year, I think it was, that Gary alerted me to this, the fact that we're involved with Newbattle, that this possibility of funding was going to be made available. And I want to congratulate our officers for managing to achieve getting so much funding for this project. It's an excellent, obviously, a new school's what's not to be pleased about there. But one aspect, of course, particularly pleasing is the cooperation with the NHS element as well. This fits well with the IJB cooperation in health and social care as well. A very pleasing project. I look forward to progress on it.
Councillor Thompson.
Yeah, delighted to see this coming forward, and I think I have to pay tribute to Gary and the team for the way that they've conducted the consultation. I know there's been a number of events, a number that have personally been at. I suppose that really this is just an example of something else that I suppose this council is not doing. Councillor Muirhead, yet another project coming forward that we're seeing moving that will help to benefit the community.
Thank you. Councillor Coventry.
Yeah, just to note that I welcome the progress, particularly the emphasis on shared services and increased capacities.
Thank you. We move to item number 12, at the Last Wade Centre, proposed new all-weather surface pitch consultation report. Again, a report by Mr Sherritt.
Thanks, Chair. This report is to advise Council of the outcome of the consultation process that we've gone through for proposed new all-weather surface up at Last Wade Centre, and to seek the Council's approval to tender for the procurement of the outcome. The consultation event was held back in February, and that's continued with discussions with various groups and representatives from clubs, schools, parent groups and the likes. The event itself took the form of a presentation from the specialist provider of these pitches, and whilst there was a myriad of different styles that you could obtain from the marketplace, it was well understood by all parties that we couldn't have one size that fitted all. So there was always going to be a specific surface that was going to suit one style of sport, and somebody else would unfortunately not be able to play on that. Representatives were asked to go away from that consultation and then submit their own preferences, and that's attached to this report and set out in the preference matrix under section 2.3 within your agenda. The sports pitches within the area had to be taken into consideration as well, to look at the variety of sports that were available to the community that was serviced by this centre, and the outcome set out in 2.6 showed that there was a split between hockey and football demands for the area, and taking into account all of the returns that were shown to us and the existing facilities in the area, it was recommended that a new synthetic pitch suitable for hockey would best meet the needs of the majority of stakeholders and attract more people to participate in a wider range of sports. The surface can also be used for tennis and a training facility for most sports, thus opening up a greater variety of surface available, making as many sports as possible accessible. It was, however, noted that through the process that both football and rugby representatives sought a long-piled cushioned artificial surface for their needs, and that became evident, and one of the recommendations deals with that towards the end of the paper. You'll note within section 4 the budget is set out there against the costs, budget being 749,000 arising from the contingent value and remaining values from the Last Wade build project, against a cost estimate of £623,000. And it's recommended to Council that Council agrees that the preferred option is a new sand dressed, it should read, as opposed to filled, synthetic surface suitable for playing hockey, to authorise the Director of Resources to progress the procurement of that surface, and to authorise the Director of Resources to consider future investment into the existing Poulton Hall synthetic pitches to provide an upgrade cushioned synthetic turf pitch suitable for playing rugby and rugby and football.
Thank you. Councillor Rosie.
Thanks, Provost. I think if you look at 2.4 and page 74, at that point that just shows that the Last Wade High School students Sports Council, they submitted a letter on behalf of the 1,500 pupils, and it gave their reasoning for their preference, and they were saying that the centre would benefit from a hockey surface, which could also be used for tennis and as a training facility for most other sports. I think this one probably does introduce a lot more playing surfaces within that area for the different sports, and it makes more sports accessible, I think, the proposal that's been put forward. And the 2.5 that shows, if you see the aerial photograph, does show the other sports pitches in the area which cover more or less the football or rugby. So on these points, I would move that we accept the recommendations at 6A, B and C.
Councillor Milligan.
Provost, thank you. I'm quite happy to second Derek's motion that we accept that. I think that this is going to bring to a conclusion a fantastic centre in Lasswade. As Gary will probably can remember, just as we went to start building in Lasswade, we were approached by Midlothian Hockey and SVL Hockey associations to ask about the possibility of a pitch that would accommodate their sport. However, at that time the deal had been done and it had been signed. However, we were very, very clear that in the event that we could suppress prices and keep costs down, that there was the chance of money being left for a second all-weather pitch. And we did give a commitment to looking to make sure that it would accommodate hockey. I'm absolutely delighted today that that's what we have in front of us here. Albeit that we would probably love the water-based one, I think this is a fantastic compromise. This allows hockey to come back to Lasswade if that's where they want to come back to. It allows all the other sports the use of this as a training ground. Keep in mind we're talking about we'll have two other third-generation pitches in Bonnyrigg, one currently at Lasswade Centre and one at the Polton Hall Centre with huge training areas. I think it's great, and I hope that it will be welcomed by all. And I'd just like to congratulate Gary on the compromise that was reached.
Okay, thank you. Item number 13, Midlothian Integration Joint Board Financial Assurance report by Mr Fairley.
Thanks, Provost. This report presents to Council an update on the work undertaken to date around the whole issue of financial assurance in relation to the delegation of council resources to the new integrated joint board. Members will recollect that the board is now, the integration scheme has concluded its passage through Parliament and comes into existence on the 27th of June. The board itself will meet for the first time in August, and Council and the NHS Lothian must, by law, delegate resources to the board no later than April 2016. And I suppose that the purpose of this paper, and really papers that Council will see over the intervening period, is to make sure that you're satisfied with the financial processes that surround those resources that have been delegated to the joint board, and that you have got confidence that the due diligence around that, the resources, how they'll be used and the risks that are carried out, and you're fully aware of them. The report itself, in terms of section 3, sets out the council element of the resources that will be delegated to the board. The members will be familiar with that budget in terms of adult social care, the issues, the pressures and the risks surrounding that budget. And you'll see later on in the agenda the outturn for 2014-15 and the pressures that exist within that budget. As I say, in due course, that budget will be effectively handed over to the Integrated Joint Board, who will then, in turn, with the resources it has from NHS Lothian, return resources under the strategic plan by a method called direction to the Council, for the Council then to deliver adult care services. Clearly, with that arrangement, there are risks inherent with it as part of the change process. And work's been going on over the last considerable while to make sure that all the partners, the new joint board in its shadow year, NHS Lothian and Midlothian Council, understand what the implications are of that process, understand the risks and understand the pressures on each other's budgets. And as part of that, the report today includes a paper that went to NHS Lothian's Finance and Resources Committee in May, quite a detailed paper, and I'm happy to take members through it offline. But that really is so you can see the process that NHS Lothian are going through in a similar way to the Council. We're still at the early stage in that financial assurance process. We'll continue to work across the Lothians to take that forward with a view to concluding that and bringing reports back to the Integrated Joint Board, NHS Lothian and Midlothian Council in the autumn, so that members have comfort that they understand the financial issues around the IJB creation, the resources that are to be delegated and the change of risk that creates for the Council. So it's very much work in progress. It is all about risk and the changes. I'm happy to take any questions members may have. Otherwise, members are asked to consider the recommendations set out in Section 7.
Councillor Johnson.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Gary. Yeah, this is, although it's quite exciting, it is, we have to be mindful of the diligence and the risks that we are going to be facing. And I agree that we should accept these recommendations.
Any other questions or comments? Councillor Pottinger.
Yeah, I know there's due diligence and other reports coming to the Integrated Board, and I'm looking at the top of page 84, and on the last sentence, the order to directly influence and shape service delivery. I'm just looking for a sort of guidance on this. Do you think this will enhance the decision-making process on the shape of the policy within the Integrated Board, or do you see it being more of a financial restraints to the Integrated Board?
I think I would ask Evelyn, who is the Chief Officer in the shadow period, certainly, to respond to that.
Thank you. The work that's underway at the moment in developing the strategic plan is about that dialogue. There's been a wide dialogue with community interest groups and stakeholders around the shape of services and what our priorities are. So certainly that is all about shaping what the local priorities are and where we can make a difference by bringing that decision maker closer to this council but also to the wider community. There are undoubtedly big financial challenges ahead for all service delivery. We've, within council service, there's been a huge amount of transition. If you look back over the last 5 years in terms of how we deliver services, there are similar processes underway within NHS, and that will continue. But there's absolutely no doubt but that we will face challenges and we will need to work together around those challenges, both two organisations together but also with our wider community.
Thank you. Well done on that one. Thank you. Item number 14, reducing reoffending partnership. Report by Mr Blair.
Thanks, Provost. This report invites Council to consider a recommendation arising from the Midlothian Safer Communities Board meeting, which was held on the 19th of May. The report considered by the Board is appended to today's papers, and the recommendation of the Board is set out in section 2. Today, Provost and Council, you are invited to consider this recommendation. If you require any details on the attached report, my colleague Kevin Anderson has joined me. Thanks, Provost.
Councillor Johnson.
Thank you very much. This is a sensible way forward for communities. It's too difficult to say this whole word. The Midlothian Safer Communities Reducing Reoffending Board. I hope we get a weird name for it because it's a real mouthful. But it's the way forward, especially with the disestablishment of the CJA. And I recommend we accept these proposals.
Any other questions or comments? Councillor Baxter.
Thank you, Provost. My only concern really, and maybe I'm seeking reassurance more than anything here, is that on page 120 the current membership is 6 voting members, which are councillors, moving on page 121 to 15, of which 6 remain councillors. Therefore the majority will not be elected representatives. So I just have a concern that we're losing some democratic accountability, or am I misreading something here?
Certainly, that is in terms of the guidance, Councillor Baxter, that has been provided to date from the Scottish Government. There's still expected to be further guidance, because this is a work in progress in terms of establishing Community Justice Scotland. But there is the expectation that the ultimate oversight of these bodies will sit with community planning partnerships, which does have greater democratic accountability. But it's the extension of the remit of the government's arrangements to realign to the national legislation that there's the expectation that there will be a wider membership, which is detailed in section 4.1 and 109 of your papers in relation to the wider community representation of the proposed Shadow Board and the Safer Communities Board.
Councillor De Wink.
Provost, wouldn't it be a very good moment to review the fact that there are 2 vacant positions here, and could we not encourage Labour to stop being so churlish and not having a representative there? If Mr. Milligan doesn't want to do it himself, he could at least appoint 2 of his colleagues. It really is such an appalling state of affairs, and I was gobsmacked when he suggested that he should be the leader of the council when he can't even have the responsibility of filling these jobs. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Councillor Coventry.
Yeah, just to welcome the report, and particularly the partnership worker mentioned on page 109, drawn on the professional expertise of different organisations, which I think can only be for the good on this item.
Thank you. Item number 15, Partnership Working Update Report. A report by the Chief Executive, Mr. Laurie.
Thank you, Provost. The purpose of this report is to update Council on the progress of the joint partnership working activities and initiatives undertaken alongside East Lothian Council. The current position in terms of partnership working is set out section 3 of the report. And you can see that covers a wide range of service areas. In terms of further developments, I'd particularly draw members' attention to paragraphs 3.2 through to 3.4. At 3.2, members may recall that the 2 councils agreed to the development of a pilot partnering approach to environmental health and trading standards, commencing in November 2013. The pilot arrangement with regard to environmental health has come to an end. However, it is intended to move towards a single trading standards service across the 2 councils in due course, and work is ongoing in this regard and will be reported back in due course. At 3.3, whilst the joint managerial arrangement is currently in place for the health and safety function, now looking at extending this to include the emergency planning function. And at 3.4, both ourselves and East Lothian are scheduled to bring forward reports on the roads collaborative project, which has been led by the Improvement Service, which would propose a joint approach with Edinburgh, Fife, West Lothian and Scottish Borders. The proposal here is to introduce a governance framework which allows East Lothian and Midlothian councils to identify and make the best use of their collective resources together with other participating councils. In terms of the recommendations, Provost, the Council is simply asked to note and approve the current position regarding partnership working activities.
Thank you. Councillor Constable.
Thank you, Provost. Yes, we want to move the recommendation. These meetings with East Lothian were started when I was leader a long time ago, and it is important that 2 authorities of such similar size and huge cooperate as much as possible. As we can see in the report, some things have worked better than others, but I would welcome the continuation of this to both councils' mutual benefit.
Thank you. Councillor Muirhead.
Yeah, I think you'll find that the joint working started well before your leadership and leadership of the council Councillor Constable. Unfortunately, it kind of all fell apart when this administration took over. I think any joint working, such as that which is detailed on the paper before us today, is to be welcomed. It's just unfortunate we're in a situation where elements of joint working that we had carried out so much work to try to achieve in terms of the education support services jointly with East Lothian, the amount of meetings and seminars and events that we held prior to 2012 to try to progress that failed, and I shudder to think what this council and East Lothian actually has spent over the piece in trying to achieve that, only for it to fail at the last hurdle.
Councillor Constable.
Yes, I'd want to acknowledge that we did have, under the last administration, we did make great progress in joint workingship, but it was election results in East Lothian which were the cause of that failing.
Councillor Thompson.
Yeah, I just wanted to make that point. I think it's widely recognised in here that this council was united in trying to move forward on shared services and partnership working, but it was the Labour group in East Lothian, having taken administration there, that scuppered the whole thing.
Councillor Millian.
Yeah, it might have been so, but the reality is that the administration here didn't even kind of had been scuppered because no approaches had been made to anybody before it fell. It doesn't take away the point that there was a massive money spent, a massive money. You can see it head on. You sat here when I asked if it had been scuppered and you didn't even ken it, because you were all busy fighting with each other. And that's a fact. It doesn't take away from the facts here that there was a massive money and a massive time spent here trying to bring together the education departments and to work as one. Is all that work just did now? I mean, is there any ambers at all coming for that? I mean, you can see some of this stuff coming together through different things, but there were different areas that had been identified as being quite easy to bring together. Has there been any progress on that, or is that something that will be revisited in time to come?
I mean, there has been some progress in terms of education. That's detailed in the early part of the report, 2.2 and 2.3, but I think it's not of the scale which had been anticipated by this council at one stage, where we were, as has been said, looking to create a single education department across two councils, and I think that would have achieved both a level of savings and potential improvements in services, which would have been very welcome. In terms of whether in the future that may be possible, I mean, I suspect it may be something which we're forced towards in the future rather than having any choice about, but ultimately whether we're prepared to take, as two councils, radical decisions of that nature to bring together services is a matter which would need political agreement on both sides.
Councillor Rimney.
Thanks very much, Provost. Just on the, well, to start off by saying on the Roads Collaboration Project, I look forward to seeing what officers are going to come back with, because you don't actually need to go out, although Burness would like you to go out and take their legal advisors, because of course they're private sector, they would like us to spend money. You don't need to go out there. There's actually a statutory thing called the Regional Transport Partnership, which is actually a statutory body anyway, and it could be done under the auspices of that, which wouldn't cost the council money. And I'm just thinking of how can you do it better and how can you do it in that way. So both Midlothian and East Lothian, for example, would just need to join under that the umbrella organisation, and it would be fit for purpose, along with other authorities as they came in and out there. What I did want to ask you, Chief Executive, though, is a general question on this is I understand this is a progress report, but for example, where's all the political direction? The Joint Liaison Group, from my reading of it, is made up of officers. There's no political input whatsoever. I mean, I take it the political direction comes from from here, and then for the reporting mechanism should be back to here. And I'll highlight one, for example, where there was a partnership working in a pilot sense on both environmental health and trading standards. And all it says in the report here is, you know, that environmental health, that came to an end, report was given, and that is no more. And trading standards, there's a look to see other ways and means of doing that. And that seems, from what I can understand here, is that was okay and that was favourable. What we don't get is the reasons why that particular pilot failed, what could have been done to maybe either, dare I say, resurrect it or change it in such a way that it would be successful. Because no matter what we say and what we do, partnership working is not going to go away. We just heard from yourself, Chief Executive, that it's not looking very good this year, next year and the following years, and that how we're going to have to look at services quite different and look at services out with the norm. And I mean, Councillor Milligan highlighted the thing, for example, that, you know, we may have to, as we do every year, at budget time, we say, well, we're going to do it a little bit different. We're not going to top slice anything anymore. We're not going to take a penny here or a penny there or a pound here or a pound there. What we're going to do is we're going to actually review all the services and see if we should, whether it be statutory or non-statutory, whether we should be providing these anymore or whether we can have alternatives to that. Now, that all falls into the category, I think, of this kind of joint working. And I just try to push the Chief Executive a little bit further in saying, what's the timetable for a number of these things? When they come to an end, we look at them to see if they're successful or not. Where's the report back to say, well, this is what happened, this is how we went about it. Are there other alternative ways? Is there another method of looking at it to make it successful? Because I think the Council were unanimous in going ahead with partnership working. What we've not got is, I suppose in a sense, is the detailed report back of the success stories or indeed the failures. And I think it's the failures in particular where it doesn't work out that I think I would like to see something more than it ain't going to happen anymore and it's just shoved to one side. And I don't mean that disrespectfully, but I mean it in the sense of, I think if we're going to be proactive as a council, or progressive, should I say? No, let's use the word progressive. Progressive as a council, then I really do think that we've got to grab this one and have detailed reports back with policy directions from the Cabinet, but in a reporting back to the Council so that we all have an input in finding a joint way forward. Because up until now, this Council has been joint across the political spectrum of trying to find that agenda.
Thank you, Provost. Firstly, in relation to the issue about the potential roads collaboration project, I'm aware of the initiative you speak about. We will come back to the Council in due course. In terms of political oversight, and I imagine it was back in 2010 or 2011, we brought forward reports about the governance arrangements in relation to partnership working or shared services, as we referred to it at that stage. There is a governance mechanism there that involves the leaders of the two councils, and that is a joint liaison group. So the leaders of the council are on the joint liaison group. Specifically in relation to environmental health and trading standards, the approval from this council, and indeed from East Lothian in November 2013, was simply to run a pilot for a limited period. I think a great deal of effort went into making these pilots work. In relation to any of these, what we need to see at the end of the process is mutual benefit for both councils. The mutual benefit was clear in relation to trading standards, and that's why we will bring forward a report suggesting a more permanent way forward in relation to that, but not with environmental health, and that was reported into the joint liaison group and the leaders of the two councils. I think the broader point, I have always felt there's been strong support across the council chamber in relation to shared services and partnership working, and I think that support enables us to both as a management team and with, in the context of JLG, to take a positive route. But it's a lot of not unimportant but not big strides we're taking, and ultimately I think if we're going to make very significant savings and progress in relation to this, it will require the kind of bigger projects which were being considered at an earlier stage.
Okay, that report was just for nothing, so we've still got a long way to go, and we now move to item number 16, Regulations for Delivery of Community Learning and Development, a report by Mrs Smith.
Thank you. The Scottish Government has amended the Education Scotland Act to require councils to ensure adequate and efficient delivery of community learning and development activities in partnership with the community planning partners in each area. This report seeks approval of the required strategy and action plan, which must be published by every council and its partners by September 2015. Section 2.1 sets out that the Community Learning and Development Strategy for the period 2015-18 sets out the priorities for the field of practice referred to in legislation as community learning and development, which is carried out, whether it's carried out by the council, by other partners, including universities, further education colleges, community groups and third sector bodies. Section 2.2 sets out the Scottish Government aims for the CLD strategy, and Section 2.3 outlines how the Community Planning Partnership has engaged and consulted with a range of individuals, groups, services to produce the strategy. Section 3.1 to 3.4 highlights policy issues and IT issues, and Section 5 sets out the recommendations. The Council is recommended to approve the strategy and note the risks and further development requirements set out in this report. These will be reported through the standard monitoring arrangements.
Thank you. Councillor Constable.
Yes, it's a very welcome report. The stress on lifelong learning by the government, I think, is very important. Speaking to someone who's very old and learns something new every day I come in here, I'm in favour of this lifelong learning. A full copy of the CLD strategy is available in the members' library for anyone to refer to, and I would move the recommendation.
Questions, comments? Okay, thank you. Item number 17, school session dates for the academic year 2016-17. A report by Mrs Smith.
This report, the authority is required to set out school session dates each year with regard to statutory attendance. Section 2 gives a background to Midlothian and how we're trying to realign with Edinburgh over the next 2 years. It can't be done immediately, but we need to do it over the next 2 years. Section 4 points out the recommendations. The Council is recommended to agree the school dates, and with your permission, could I point out a typo in the appendix? Good Friday is the 14th of April and not the 14th of March. Yeah, so was I. My apologies for that.
Thank you. Councillor Constable.
Yes, just to note this and move the recommendation. It is important we do try and align our holidays to cross-border working of children and staff. It does cause a lot of grief. And of course, from the 14th, Easter can become very early, so that must be a late full moon. It's the first full moon after the equinox that is decreed for Easter, and so that must be about as late as it can be. Thank you.
Okay. We move to item number 18, Strategic Development Plan for South East Scotland, number 2, Main Issues Report. Report by Mr Johnson.
Thank you, Provost. As members will be aware, Midlothian is one of the 6 constituent councils of the South East Scotland Strategic Development Planning Authority, that authority comprising a joint committee which is drawn, 2 members drawn from each of the 6 constituent councils. And the Strategic Development Planning Authority is charged with a statutory duty to prepare a strategic development plan for the wider region covered by the 6 council areas. The current Strategic Development Plan, number 1, was approved by Scottish ministers in 2013, but under the terms of the legislation, it's expected that the authorities will keep a rolling programme of renewal of the development plan every 5 years. And that means that the process of preparing Strategic Development Plan number 2 is already underway, with a view to it eventually coming into force and being approved within the 5-year period after 2013. So this report to Council advises of progress on the preparation of the new Strategic Development Plan number 2 and seeks ratification of the decisions of the Strategic Development Planning Authority's Joint Committee. On 29th of May, that Joint Committee agreed the content of the main issues report and associated documents for publication and public consultation, but subject to ratification by each of the member councils, and so there are reports going up to each of the other 5 councils at the present time with a view to seeking ratification of each council. If that is achieved, then the documents, which are already in the public domain, would go forward for a formal representation period running from the 21st of July, in fact, to the 30th of September. Although it notes an earlier date of 15th September in the papers, we recently received further information from the Strategic Development Plan Office that the view is that the consultation would run to the 30th of September, and I'm not suggesting there's any difficulty with that, but just for members to be fully aware of that. The main issues report is the primary public consultation stage. It's about issues, not policy, although it must include what's called a preferred strategy. Part 3 of this report to Council summarises the main issues report document, and whilst it covers the full range of primary land uses, it is inevitable that the strategy for growth will generate particular interest in the levels and location of new housing. And I would suspect that that will be the main focus of representations which are made on the main issues report from the public and other interested stakeholders. Just a couple of points to make in relation to that. Except for Edinburgh City, all of the other 5 districts have sufficient existing housing land supply to meet the need and demand between 2012 and 2029. And there therefore is an argument, and it comes through in some of the text of the main issues report, to consider whether any additional new housing allocations are needed in those districts. The other point to pick out is that 64% of that need and demand, as assessed by the Housing Needs and Demand Assessment undertaken as part of the preparation of the plan, 64% of that need and demand is for either social housing or below market rent accommodation. And that's a significant issue in terms of just how the housing land supply should be considered and what the mechanisms should be to bring forward that level of affordable housing to meet that level of demand. The only other point I want to pick out, which is highlighted, is the key issue, and it's often picked up in representations as well, the key issue of delivery of associated infrastructure to meet the sort of consequential demands from that sort of level of new housing. The main issues report puts forward the potential idea for a strategic infrastructure investment fund comprising a mix of public sector forward funding, private sources of finance and region-wide collected developer contributions. That would be something of a departure for this part of Scotland, although it's not unknown and has been tried elsewhere, most notably Aberdeen, Aberdeenshire. That takes us really to the recommendations, which are that the Council ratifies the decision of the Strategic Development Planning Authority to approve the main issues report for Strategic Development Plan number 2 for purposes of publication and public consultation, along with its associated documents comprising the monitoring statement, the interim environmental report, and the Equalities and Human Rights Impact Assessment, and, of course, requires submission of further reports as the remaining statutory stages of the plan are taken through to its eventual approval. Happy to take questions on anything, Provost.
Thank you. Councillor Bryant.
Thank you for that, Ian. Particularly your comments about the housing. I'd like to make a comment myself. The main issues report is a product of extensive work by the Joint Committee and sets out some significant planning challenges for the region. In light of the housing challenge across the region, representatives of the committee have sought a meeting with the Scottish Ministers to raise the way in which housing land supply is calculated and the strategy for meeting the significant need for social housing. This main issues report, as presented today, does not adversely affect the interests of Midlothian's communities, and I therefore commend it for ratification for the purposes of public consultation.
Thank you. Councillor Rimney.
Yeah, thanks, Provost. Can I just maybe ask a question to Mr Johnson regarding under 3.5, a place for communities. Right in the centre of that is you've already acknowledged that Edinburgh is going to be the main difficulty. Surprise, surprise. But I mean, just looking at the experience over this last few months with Edinburgh Council, in that they haven't got their local development plan anywhere near where it should be, that they ended up in a right mess where they ended up saying, well, there's really, we'll put into the ministers, but there's really two options here. If you don't like that one, you know, we'll go with the other one. And Alec Neil, as a Minister for Planning, has already given in to public pressure with regard to the extension at the back of Camo, the residents there being totally opposed to that. And I just wonder how the people that got these houses when these residents moved in many years ago felt like before that. But, you know, it's very interesting when you see development up to a back garden and then the next stage of development is totally opposed by those people that have just moved in there. But in all seriousness, we're in a right crisis situation in Edinburgh, and there's no doubt about it that will then get further pressure in through the CES Plan 2, in the sense that the divvy up of the number of houses required for the CES Plan area means that there's going to be a lot of pressure on there. And I think this council should be prepared today to put the marker down and saying, enough's enough. We've actually got more than enough to see us through the period. Okay, there may be small adjustments made to that, but in particular, you know, we're not just because Edinburgh can't make up their mind where they want to develop, then it shouldn't fall to Midlothian, which of course is the nearest place to Edinburgh, to take up that shortfall. That's the first thing I'd like to say, Provost. I'd also like to have a further report, and I know Councillor Bryant elected to meeting with the Minister. Well, you can meet with Tom, Dick and Harry, but the stage, we should be getting an expert in to actually explain to us how the heck we are going to address a 52% need in the rented sector. And I'll just say rented sector to generalise the point that's been made in the report. And I do think that we need somebody brought in to actually explain how the hang we are going to address that. Because clearly we can't be relying on bits of land that we happen to own. We've not got an extensive capital pot, I don't think, unless Mr Fairley nods differently, to actually go in and start buying up land to develop rented houses, and 25% on any development, private development, 25% of that coming back for affordable housing, does not meet that kind of demand. So I think there's going to have to be a report back after the summer break to actually start to explain how we address that, because clearly it's going to be again pressure on the local authorities to come up with that kind of demand. Let me put it that way, and I just would like to see that. So with these two things, Provost, I'm quite happy with where we are at the moment because it's only a consultation exercise. I understand that, but just to put the marker down that, you know, I think Midlothian will not be looking to take any extra houses because Edinburgh can't build them.
Will you come back on that, Mr Johnson?
Only briefly to say, yeah, the analysis of Councillor is correct. in as much as there is the main issues report does show a shortfall in whether Edinburgh can meet its demand for housing over the period 2012 to 2029, and therefore the issue, to some extent, really, before the public and others, is how is that shortfall met, and what are the options, and what are people's views on that. And the plan clearly identifies that in many other districts there's already a substantial supply to meet their own demand. In terms of affordable housing, then, yeah, this is a very different set of circumstances to what's been previously been the case. The level of demand is that much more. It probably will need some fundamental thoughts about just housing finance, and it may well be that that's beyond necessarily just an individual strategic planning authority. It may need action at a wider level.
Councillor Bryant.
Just to reiterate, that Midlothian will not be taking any more houses on behalf of Edinburgh. I can tell you that.
Okay. Councillor Milligan.
I think we'll all be assured by that, because the last thing we're wanting today is to be taking any more houses. We have hundreds of, dozens, certainly maybe even 100 and odd housing sites that have been lying for many, many years, not being developed, and we're being forced down this road, having to identify even more houses. I mean, we will be watching this with interest. This is a consultation and we're very much aware of this, but we will be watching with interest as to how this and the development plan pan out, because effectively there is a great concern by the public out there as to the amount of houses we've been made to take, and certainly when you see the amount of sites that are still lying undeveloped that have been in local plans for many, many years.
Okay. Item number 19, footway and footpath network condition. Report by Ricky Moffat.
Thanks, Provost. Council asked that a report came forward highlighting the possible repair and upgrading of footpaths and footways within older council estates. If I turn to 2.3, we've costed the repairs that would be required within those areas, both adopted and non-adopted, and members will see that comes to 5.772 million, and a further breakdown is provided in Appendix A. In 2.4, it's explained why the housing revenue account is not a suitable mechanism to fund those repairs. So turning to the report implications, I've highlighted under the revenue implications a table that shows if we were carrying out these works over a 3-year period, both the capital spend and the loan charge costs. I've also listed there that given the Council's current financial position, an alternative option capping the spend at £2 million, and again listing the capital spend and the loan charges. So moving to the recommendations, Council's recommended to formally adopt the footways and footpaths as outlined in Appendix A, and that includes those that are currently non-adopted. Note the financial implications of the proposed investment to upgrade the various footpaths and the implications that that would have for other capital projects. Approve an investment of £2 million to upgrade footpaths, and that recognises the Council's overall financial position. Also noting there the budget gap. Note that the intention would be to implement inspection and maintenance regime on those footpaths that currently don't get that level of service, and note that our report would come back in 2017-18 providing an update.
Councillor Rosie.
Thanks, Provost. I mean, I think all members will have pavements and paths in their areas which they reckon requires attention, and this report actually highlights the extent of the problem that we have. It's good that there will be regular inspections of the footways in order that anything that is considered a danger to the public will be made safe. Can I ask, Ricky, if we agree to this proposal, the recommendations, will members be advised of what's going to be prioritised, which paths will be and footways will be prioritised?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, if members agree to the recommendation to fund these repairs to the tune of £2 million, then yes, we would come back with a programme of work which would detail which areas were going to be tackled and in which order. So we would provide that to each member.
Councillor Milligan.
Provost, thank you. Firstly, can I welcome the report? It's something that we've sort of talked about for quite a while, and quite happy with the bulk of the recommendations that are there. What I would say is, Ricky, I'm hoping what you're going to do is advise elected members what's going to be done. No, I'm saying them, here's what's going to be done and what's the one fight starting. It should simply be based on professional assessment of what's urgent. The reality here with this, though, is that if you look, there's already a £12 million shortfall and what we require. And I think, to be honest, I don't think we're any worse than any other councils in the percentage term. But the reality is that a lot of the pavements in that in our mainstay areas are already needing repaired and upgraded. And there's a £12 million bill there for that. Putting £2 million towards it is fine because it starts to eat into it. But the reality is the areas in the housing estates and the unadopted areas that we're going to adopt now would never get touched with that because they'll never get the priority. And therefore the housing side and the council housing estates is unlikely to get a priority there. I'm advised that rules have changed over the last few years, which used to allow the housing revenue account and housing areas to be able to upgrade the pavements and the car parks and that in the areas. I'm advised that that's since changed. I would like to suggest that in addition to what we're doing in the 2015-16 funding, 1.974 million, that I would ask that we would give consideration to transferring money for the HRA account to deal with that within the council housing areas, and that a report come back to us on the effect in the capital plan for the HRA, and if the effect isn't that much, that we give further consideration to funding the £5.772 million for the housing revenue account. I'm advised by Gary Fairley that we're allowed to do that. However, he would want to bring back a report on the effect on the housing revenue account. So I would suggest for this year only that we bring forward the 2015-16 spend for that, in addition from the housing revenue account, and a report we brought back to us as to the full effect, to the full amount coming over from housing revenue.
Mr. Fairley.
Thanks. I just wanted to clarify the position. The advice I was given to Councillor Milligan is that the mechanism exists to transfer reserves from HRA to the general fund reserve. That's within the power of council. That could then be transferred over to fund capital expenditure on the general fund account. However, my note of caution would be that, as you'll see further on in today's agenda, that although the HRA does have a reserve, that is committed, mostly committed, to fund the new build programme and the SHQS and other investment works on council housing programme. If members are minded to do such a transfer, then I would perhaps ask your indulgence that a further report is brought back so that you fully understand the implications on the housing revenue account before making such a commitment.
Councillor Rosie.
Yeah, I think it's something as regards the HRA that we need to know a good bit about before we could commit, I think, to that, in principle, probably, if it's possible. But we've also got to watch, as has been highlighted there by Mr Fairley, is the fact that if it does start to impact on our house building, then that could be a bit of a worry. And in view of what's been said earlier today by Councillor Muirhead about the house building, I think we can't put that at risk. So if on that, I'm happy enough to get a report back, see what it says, and then we can have a look at it in a bit more detail. But as it stands, if we could move on the money, the 2 million here, this proposal, I'm happy for an amendment in there that asks for a report back on using HRA.
Councillor Milligan.
Yeah, Provost, thank you. Gary, there's a couple of things. Number one, as in year 15-16, the 1.974 million, there is enough play in the HRA account that wouldn't have any effect on that. It's not uncommitted, unless I'm reading the House and Revenue Capital account wrong. That there is a slippage. There's enough money in there without having any effect, and that's why I was asking for this year's money to be brought forward in a future plan. You talk about money being in there for the housing quality standards and that. The last report we had was that all the council houses, where possible, actually were up to that. The only ones that didn't have that mark were ones that physically couldn't. For example, they didn't have access to gas and stuff like that. So we were already told that we were already. So I'm not sure, and we'll come to that in the capital plans, to what ring fencing we'll have in there for that. But I had thought that there was enough money there. And the point I'm making here is this is our council housing estates, and it's all very well building new council houses, but to allow the older estates to deteriorate. And I've not been, quite frankly, in the professional area, when they come back with what to prioritise, these estates are going to be away at the bottom. It's the main pavement areas that are going to get the priority, and I would think that we would all agree that. However, the only way we're going to get some funds into these areas is to find other ways of funding them.
Mr. Fairley.
Just to clarify, in terms of the later on in the agenda, we highlight that although the HRA reserve is at £21 million, it's the majority are required to fund existing investment. Now, there will be an element of the reserve that's held back for unforeseen circumstances and for variations that inevitably arise over the size of the capital programme. I would just ask for members' indulgence to actually come back with some facts and figures before you commit resources to find that it then has consequences you weren't fully aware of. And we could do that for Council in August if I'll look to my colleagues to bring a report back as soon as possible.
Councillor Young.
Thanks. Just for Ricky, on the risk element of the report, it says that, you know, if no action is taken, there may be exposure to a number of third-party claims. I mean, presumably, it would be proper to say there may be exposure to an increasing number of third-party claims. Certainly aware, anecdotally, from constituents that there have been, you know, claims ongoing, as all local authorities would have. I mean, it's an obvious statement to say that the best value use of our resources is to put that money into repairing the infrastructure that we've currently got, rather than paying it out to solicitors and to people who've unfortunately been injured. I just wondered, just to help us understand the context of that risk element, do you have a rough figure for our annual compensation bill in relation to the footpath network?
For members today, I don't have an exact figure, but we're perhaps slightly more fortunate than some other local authorities that the problem hasn't so far surfaced as much as it has in other areas, and it would be in the order of a 5-figure sum, i.e. if I was given a rough indication, it's probably around the £25,000 to £30,000, but I would have to check that before I could confirm that figure.
I'm grateful for your estimation. Thanks, Ricky.
Okay, we have to accept the recommendations with the report to come back to the August meeting. Yeah, okay, thank you. Item number 20, Procurement Strategy 2015 to 2018. Report by Mr. Fairley.
Thanks, Provost. This report sets out for Council approval a new procurement strategy for Council. The strategy is set out in the appendix to the report. It reflects the local, national and indeed international expectations and challenges for procurement. In terms of locally, the objective set out is increased spend in the Midlothian economy. Members should note that currently about 27% of our procurement spend is in the local economy. We'd like to increase that. We also want to maximise the community benefits that we can secure through procurement, particularly in larger contracts, for example, apprentice schemes. Nationally, we'll see the requirements of the Procurement Reform Act kicking in. And also, as members will see, and I hope will welcome in the report, the move to seek living wage accreditation as part of our procurement strategy. Internationally, we see changes in EU procurement law that we need to make sure that we are compliant with. Section 3.7 of the report sets out these objectives, and it's summarised really in terms of supporting and stimulating the local economy, levering and support for the Council's corporate social responsibilities, and at the same time ensuring that procurement of goods and services contributes to the efficient and effective delivery of the many services that Council provide. In addition to the strategy, we'll bring forward a separate report which will set out the contract delivery the plan for Council services, a much more operational document in terms of the various pieces of procurement work that we'll need to do over the coming years to both deliver these objectives and ensure best value in terms of our expenditure. Really today, Council is asked to endorse the report and approve the procurement strategy for 2015 through 2018. Thank you.
Councillor Bryant.
Thank you, Provost. This initiative from Scotland XL and Midlothian are pretty far down the road with those items in item 3.7 about the local economy and the procurement strategy and living wage. So I look forward to the report coming in next year to see how far we've got.
Councillor Milligan.
Provost, thank you. I can welcome the report. One of the things I'm a wee bit concerned about in the 3.6 and involving communities and other stakeholders, we talk about having relevant staff have been consulted during the development. I would have hoped that they would have read somewhere there that relevant companies, local companies and that would have also been consulted. For example, so some of the support groups for local businesses, small local business associations and stuff like that would have been allowed to put an input into the procurement strategy. One of the things that we started some years back, and I'm hoping we're continuing that, is we were meeting regularly with local companies, small, new companies, and even some of the larger companies to help them understand the requirements to tender through the Midlothian Council procurement strategy. And it was just to seek assurance that we were still meeting these companies and still trying to encourage them to come forward with tenders for work, because it is important that we try to encourage local companies. It's heartening to hear that we actually were above the national average for local companies actually getting work for the council, and I think that's good. There was an issue raised at Audit Committee, and I felt perhaps it didn't get completed, and that was the question on the procurement arrangements that the council has. And it was sort of suggested by the officer leading there that it would be helpful, or indeed it could be financially beneficial, to look at bringing in more procurement officers to look at the way that our contracts are initially put out to tender, the full lifetime term of them, and then what happens is we're getting to the end of them. And indeed, I think it was South Ayrshire you looked at, who had a couple of more, 2 or 3 more staff than us, and you looked at their scoring on the matrix and they were way above where we were. And indeed it was suggested by that officer at that meeting that it could actually indeed save considerable money having additional procurement officers. Now, I'm not suggesting that we sit here and say, right, we're going to have a couple of more procurement officers. Is it worth having a report back to council just sort of saying, well, here's what other councils are doing, and you know, actually bringing in a couple of more procurement staff might actually save you a lot more than what it's costing you to bring them in and help you manage it better. So I wonder if we could ask for a report back on that.
Just in terms of the various questions, firstly, throughout the year we through the procurement team host, I think we call them the Meet the Buyer events. So those have been going on, and I'm sure some of the dialogue from that has helped shape the development of the strategy. I can assure Councillor Milligan we will continue to see them as being a key focus. And indeed, it's not just about helping local companies secure contracts from the council, but we really want to open up to them the whole of the Scottish local government procurement market. Indeed, Scotland Excel, who visited week past Monday, shared that they're managing contracts in terms of something like £650 million, if my memory serves me right. So we can help make sure that our local companies can get access to those considerable contracts and can be competitive throughout Scotland. In terms of procurement, I suppose since the early years of Midlothian's involvement in the PCA, where we performed very badly, we have grown the procurement team, and I suppose that we've seen procurement shift from being in the middle, the pure tendering technical exercise of putting contracts out, evaluating them and securing the best price, to really looking at the wider aspects, from really defining what you need, what it is that you need, what is the market offering, right through to how you manage the contract, how you ensure the contractor is delivering what you've set out to tender for. And that's where we are now in terms of the procurement environment that we work in. We have recently, through the business transformation, the ISS strand of the business transformation review, restructured the procurement team, and that was reported up through the business transformation board. So there are some changes which are currently being taken forward. Perhaps I would suggest that in terms of looking at the structure again and resources, we could have changed the number of staff. I suppose what we've tried to do is strike a balance between the resources within the team and the workload and the opportunity to seek savings. Perhaps I would suggest that we maybe ascertain where we are when we see the post. We currently got a procurement capability assessment that will move to a new scoring regime in terms of where we sit across council, where the council sits across Scotland. Perhaps that would be the time when we see the outcome of that new method of scoring to assess, for members to then assess how they felt the service was performing and whether additional resources were required. But happy if members are minded to bring back a report on resources in the interim.
Unless I'm mistaken, there's other members here that were at the audit committee. I would certainly say that I thought that the officer that was presenting the report was quite clear in his thought that requiring an additional resource for procurement officers could lead to very good savings and more than pay for themselves and keep the council on the right track. So I think having a report back, even in an up-to-date position and what's there, just so that there could be open and discussion. And indeed, I'd be quite happy to see that even a seminar, for example, just to discuss this, if there was stuff that the officers didn't want to discuss publicly on how this would work. But it would be helpful, I think, for us to get something like this back. And maybe I've picked the officer up wrong at the audit committee, but I was more than certain that's what he had to say.
Councillor Baxter.
Thank you, Provost. Yeah, just going on to what Councillor Milligan was just saying, I remember distinctly that discussion we had, and I seem to remember the figure. It may be South Ayrshire, I can't remember. It was a different council, a bigger one. They'd invested something like about £300,000 in procurement officers, and over the years they'd ramped it up to a £5.6 million a year savings. So that's a huge benefit for putting the investment in. I'm pleased that over the years the concept of procurement has moved on from simply cash savings, and I'm particularly pleased that within this policy that there's a strong emphasis on helping local suppliers, not just because it helps the local economy, it helps smaller businesses which don't siphon off the funds to somewhere abroad in a tax haven or whatever, but it really does involve a lot of money which comes back into the local economy, and also helps reduce the amount of transport involved. I'd like to ask a couple of questions though. On page 163 of the agenda, that's within the procurement policy principles of the strategy. Point 15 refers to achieving Scottish living wage accreditation. Promote and encourage the payment of living wage through contracts. I'd just like to know what exactly that involves, the promotion and encouragement. And also 17, ensure that contracts are not 0 hours contracts and exclusivity clauses and discourage blacklisting. I'd like to know how much we're ensuring that zero-hour contracts are not involved in any of the businesses which we're offering procurement contracts to.
Yeah, in terms of achieving Scottish Living Wage accreditation, we've been in contact through the Poverty Alliance, if my memory serves me right, which sets out there's an acceptance that councils within the procurement frameworks that they operate in, within the contracts they already have, cannot simply enforce, you will pay your workers this amount of money. We, within the framework of our contracts, and working with the accreditors, we have an approach we can take to achieve accreditation which shows the direction of travel and shows the commitment from the council to ensure where it can influence it, either now or in the future, it can shift to the living wage. We've already seen some good work in that field through the health and social care contracts that we have. So we're already in some respects ahead of others in that respect. So it's about the direction of travel and doing everything within our power to ensure that we can deliver that and meet the requirements for accreditation. In terms of zero-hour contracts, I suppose it's first of all for us to make sure that as we're putting contracts out, we define what we want and what we require in such a way that it gives a clear message to the providers that we don't want to go down that 0 hours route, and certainly we would make sure through, in conjunction with our legal advisors, that we don't have contractors who've got clauses within their employment conditions that are such that they penalise staff either on 0 hours contracts or particularly exclusivity clauses that sit around those. And again, it's working within the regulations, international and national, to make sure we're doing everything in our power to make sure that those practices are not things that happen on our watch, so to speak.
Councillor Pottinger.
Yeah, I'm aware of very much the political environment and putting this into the procurement bill in the Scottish Parliament, etc. And just to say that when these companies are paying a fair wage and they're paying the living wage and they're not involved in the 0 hours contracts, they tend to be the best companies. They tend to have less turnover of staff, they tend to be more reliable, and they tend to qualify for best value when we're actually issuing contracts. It's not always just on best price, but a lot of times they'll also be in there at the best price as well as. And when we're choosing contractors, we will do this regularly on best value. Geographical swaying of these contracts to ones that are based in this area, the local authority, is possible, and we've been doing that quite well. We've had, if you've mentioned some of these Meet the Buyer events, and I can remember going to one with Morrison Construction and Gorebridge regarding the new high school. But the Meet the Buyer events are very successful, like the ones at the Bush Estate that's been engaged with, and it's a pity that we as local members are not actually got the invites to these kind of events as well as to see the kind of successes that we're having there. But yes, let's have a report on more of this surgery work, this Meet the Buyer event, this proactive kind of work that we're doing. We're getting a lot of local companies onto the tender register, and it's not just for the term contracts and the big contracts. And I noticed and we've debated this before, but the ones that was on the 3-year term contracts just now are not getting extended by another 2 years, and it's no matter of price. But we should be informed more of this kind of process and the procurement situation. I think Gary Sherritt referred to a member's briefing that was getting issued, but I didn't care anything about that, and none of my colleagues on this side seem to know anything about a member's briefing. But when these contracts come up for renewal, it's as many people as possible that can know it, rather than them that are just sitting waiting on it being a flag on the Scottish Excel website that they could opt into. It's right to try and promote these to others, because the more that are tendering for it, the more chance we're going to get a good price, and the savings is accordingly. So the project work that we're doing for the outreach stuff, yes, let's find out if we can extend that, and is it cost neutral or even how much cost benefits would we get by extending this kind of proactive activity in procurement.
Just a couple of points. Councillor Pottinger makes a really good point about the need to make sure we engage with our suppliers and have as many people bidding for work, and that way we can make sure we're seeking the best quality and the best price, and all of our contracts are assessed on both price and quality. The challenge with investing resources within procurement is really a lot of our contract work we've now been out through robust tendering 2-3 times. So the opportunity to get real budgetary savings out of those tendering exercises is becoming more and more limited. And that's why we need to look at the whole procurement journey from inception right through to contract management. And equally, as we see suppliers moving to pay the living wage, as we've seen in the care sector, it starts to put pressure on costs. So, suppliers, bulk of their costs being where it is payroll, the living wage, the changes in national insurance, the pension regulations, etc., add to their cost base. And so it is very challenging to secure financial savings, as you'll see disclosed later on in the papers today. But certainly happy to take, if Council is minded, to come back with a further report.
Councillor Pottinger.
Just further on the living wage, it's becoming more and more important, for the living wage when we hear the Chancellor talking about taking out working tax credits for many people, and that's many people who are on very low budgets, and low wages, and that's made them up to a living wage in the past, if you want, and if that gets taken away, that's more and more important, that we actually do have a proper wage structure for contractors.
Councillor Muirhead.
Just quickly, just to emphasise the point that has been made about the discussions that we had at the audit committee meeting. The procurement manager did, when we were discussing the performance of some other councillors with different levels of staff, he actually indicated some examples of additional activity that he would instigate had he additional members of staff that would add value, both in terms of the potential savings that could be made. So just to concur what Derek was saying, that was definitely said. So it would be helpful to have, I think, a report on that basis.
Councillor Baxter.
Thank you, Prof. Just to touch on something Gary was saying before about the cost pressures, there was a report about a few weeks ago, I think KPMG, the accountants, they started paying them a living wage, and they actually found it was saving them money because the cost of re-advertising posts, because the turnover dropped remarkably. And obviously, if everyone pays a living wage, then turnover goes up again. But the pressures at the moment are actually not as big as people would think. What I would like to see the Council doing, and perhaps it's not for this item or for here, but I'd like us to publicise those companies within Midlothian who do pay the living wage, whether it's through contracts that we deal with ourselves or more generally, because I think it's something that many customers, in the wider context rather than just in procurement, but many customers throughout Midlothian will be more inclined to use businesses which pay the living wage, even if they have to pay a little bit more maybe for the goods.
Would that be allowed?
I think that's something we need to maybe take away and look at offline if Councillor Baxter's happy with that.
Are we happy to accept this report and get a report back as requested by Councillor Milligan? Okay, thank you. Item number 21. I think there's a request for a 10-minute comfort break, a wee cup of tea. So we come back in 10 minutes. Thank you.